Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new Nancy Drew analysis video. Today's video is brought to you by the patrons over at Mystique Manor and by all the official Fellow Detective channel members. If you too would like to support the channel and gain access to exclusive features, check out patreon.com/wizardkitten to become a patron, or click join next to the subscribe button to become an official fellow detective. As our beloved childhood fairy tales and stories have taught us, heroes are often in desperate need of a valuable sidekick. After all, it's hard work being a hero. Things are dangerous, you're constantly put in emotionally and physically draining situations, and sometimes you just need a shoulder to lean on. Enter the Nancy Drew Sidekicks. In the Nancy Drew PC games, Nancy occasionally works alongside some of her dearest friends while solving a mystery. Her sidekicks are usually the same, with some combination of Bess Marvin and George Fane, Ned Nickerson and Frank and Joe Hardy, and more recently, Deirdre Shannon, joining Nancy on her cases. These characters also often assist Nancy as phone friends, but today I want to examine how successful her sidekicks are when they join her in person. If the developers made a conscious decision to allow the characters to physically be with Nancy, then there should have been a good reason. So today, let's rank Nancy's sidekick combinations from most useless to most valuable. My parameters for this video are pretty straightforward. Do the sidekicks add something to the mystery, plot, or storyline? Are they entertaining and enjoyable to have around? And do they actually do something to help Nancy? With these three criteria in mind, let's get to ranking, keeping in mind that there may be mild plot spoilers for the following Nancy Drew games. You have been warned. Up first, number 7, Deirdre Shannon in Midnight in Salem. Now, considering that many things in Midnight in Salem could be described as useless, it probably shouldn't come as a surprise that Deirdre Shannon ends up being the most useless sidekick. Frankly, I can't even think of anything worthwhile that Deirdre does in the course of the mystery. She's around for some witty repartee, I guess, but even that falls flat much of the time. Her most important contribution to the mystery is that she asked Nancy to solve it in the first place. Otherwise, Deirdre just follows Nancy around, jump-scaring her every second she gets. Personal space, girl, please. Even when Deirdre isn't following Nancy, she claims to be doing research or interviewing people, and getting literally nowhere. Sorry, Deirdre. You were a lot of help as a phone friend in The Deadly Device, but your sidekick performance in Midnight in Salem just isn't it. Number 6, Bess Marvin and George Fane in The Shattered Medallion. Several very strange decisions were made in the treatment of Bess and George in this game. First of all, we could have had a fun, adventurous time with George, but she's literally taken out of action within the first 10 minutes of the game and then falls asleep for the rest while she's recovering. She's sometimes awake long enough to leave Nancy notes on her iPad, but otherwise, useless. Second of all, what the heck happened with Bess? Her characterization in this game made her completely unhelpful as a sidekick. I'm assuming she's supposed to be comedic relief or something, but considering we have Patrick and Sunny already filling that role, it sort of just feels unnecessary to have Bess there at all. Her utility comes down to distracting other characters and finding a point card, but otherwise, Nancy does literally all the work. As sidekicks, Bess and George just do not pull it off in this one. Number 5, George Fane in Ransom of the Seven Ships. Gotta say, George, it's not looking good for you so far. In her defense, George is at least trying to be helpful during this case, and she's under a lot of stress since Bess has been kidnapped. But it's become a bit of a joke in the Nancy Drew community about just how useless George is in this game. She spends the entire game at the desk in the resort trying to fix the radio phone and failing. The entire game. She leaves once to help Nancy escape from a cave, which granted is extremely helpful, but otherwise, she sits there fiddling away with a screwdriver and having fights with Cuckoo the Parrot. The radio phone isn't going to happen, George. Stop trying to make the radio phone happen. Yeesh. Number 4, Frank and Joe Hardy in Creature of Kapu Cave. Finally, we're starting to get some competent sidekickery. Frank and Joe definitely hold their own in this game. By staying at Big Island Mike's immersion excursion, they're able to question the Mapus and share some pretty valuable clues with Nancy. Without their intel, Nancy wouldn't be able to solve her case, which kind of coincidentally coincides with their case. The reason they don't rank higher, though, is because they're not really working together, but rather more alongside one another. Their cases overlap, but the Hardy Boys are less sidekicks in this mystery and more helpful accompaniments. If the cases blended together better, perhaps they'd be higher, but for now, they're solidly in the middle. Number 3, Bess Marvin in Legend of the Crystal Skull. Now this is the kind of Bess sidekick I want to see. None of that shattered medallion rubbish. Despite her fears and reservations, Bess holds her own when interrogating Lamont and Dr. Buford. She successfully finds clues, incapacitates Lamont with sneezing powder, and even infiltrates a Jolly Rogers meeting and gets a confession out of Dr. Buford. Now, does she misstep a little along the way? Sure. Maybe she didn't need to cause Lamont bodily harm, and maybe she didn't need to tell a suspect some of the most valuable information in the case. But ultimately, Bess is a great sidekick in this one. Nancy does need to actually convince her to act as a sidekick, but once she works up the courage, Bess does a lovely job. Number 2, Frank and Joe Hardy in Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. This game does so many things well, and among them is Frank and Joe Hardy as Nancy's sidekicks. Throughout the game, Frank and Joe talk through clues with Nancy, ultimately helping her to come to important revelations. They also find important clues of their own, like the name of Jake's engineer. They actively participate in solving the mystery, but they never upstage our hero, definitely the mark of a good sidekick. Plus, they're both devilishly handsome, an added sidekick bonus. But good looks aside, the best sidekick team in the Nancy Drew series is number 1, Ned Nickerson, Bess Marvin, and George Fane in Alibi in Ashes. It is not an exaggeration to say that Nancy could not have solved this mystery without the assistance of her faithful sidekicks, because she's literally locked up in jail and cannot leave because she has been framed. Thankfully, she has a crack team of sidekicks who are willing to drive all around River Heights, interrogate suspects, find clues, collect fingerprints, and gather alibis on her behalf. It could definitely be argued that they upstage Nancy a bit in this case, since she isn't actively solving the case as often as she normally does. But Nancy is clearly the ringleader in this operation. Nancy is still making all the calls, putting all the pieces together, and delegating. She's the obvious leader, but she has a group of loyal and frankly pretty competent sidekicks helping her out. With the exception of the vase in the antique shop snafu, but I digress. All in all, Nancy is lucky to have such a valuable group of sidekicks on her side in this game, otherwise she might still be imprisoned. And there you have it, fellow detectives, my ranking of Nancy Drew's sidekicks from useless to valuable. It's interesting to see how the sidekicks vary from game to game, with even some of the most useless ascending to valuable heights in the right circumstances. It's also interesting that Nancy has so many friends who are willing to back her on these difficult cases, and thank goodness for that. The sidekicks are some of our most beloved characters in the series, and for good reason. But what do you think, fellow detectives? Do you agree with my ranking? Which sidekicks do you think are the most useless and the most valuable? Who would you bring with you as your mystery-solving sidekick if you were a detective? Let a Wizard Kitten know in the comment section down below. If you really enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like button or tipping me for the video with a super thanks next to the download button right beneath the video. If you would like to come join a fantastic group of fellow detectives at Mystique Manor as a patron for the channel, gain access to exclusive content, and support the making of more content like this, please check out patreon.com/wizardkitten. I also have channel memberships with exclusive badges and emojis to use during streams and in the comment section. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming an official fellow detective, click join next to the subscribe button. Please feel free to follow the channel on Instagram or Discord, linked in the description box down below. And as always, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Cozy Game content. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.